In the previous episode, through a precise timeline reconstruction, we argued that the Thursday crucifixion theory meets both the time requirements, raised on the third day and dead for 3 days and 3 nights, far better than the traditional Friday crucifixion theory. In this episode, we will introduce our second core argument. Rather than focusing on the length of time itself, we turn to a crucial yet often overlooked hidden clue. Between Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, how many Sabbaths actually passed? According to the traditional Friday crucifixion theory, only one Sabbath occurred during that period, the regular weekly Jewish Sabbath, a Saturday based on Gregorian calendar. But this seemingly obvious conclusion runs into a wall when we examine the original Greek text of Scripture. Let us look at Matthew 28:1. Now, after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the grave. The word translated Sabbath here is actually plural in Greek. Literally translated, it reads, after the Sabbaths. How should this be explained? Traditional theology usually argues that this is simply a Hebraic influence on Greek, called a idiomatic plural used as a singular, so there is no need for alarm. But is that really true? I conducted a full grammatical survey of the original text. In the 4 Gospels, the word Sabbath appears a total of 56 times. Singular form appears 36 times. Plural form appears 20 times. Once you compare them carefully, it becomes clear that the Gospel writers were extremely precise in distinguishing singular from plural. Whenever the singular form is used, the text refers to a single Sabbath. For example, Matthew 24:20, pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. Because fleeing is a one-time action, the singular form is used. Similarly, for instance, Luke 6:6 and John 5:10 also use the singular Sabbath. But when the plural form is used, it refers to a period involving multiple Sabbaths. For example, in Matthew 12:1, at that time Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbaths, and his disciples became hungry and began to pick the heads of grain and eat. The plural here suggests that the disciples plucking grain was not merely a one-time incident on a single Sabbath, but something occurring repeatedly over a span of Sabbaths, which eventually provoked collective opposition from the Pharisees. Since the Gospel writers used these terms with such precision, and there was absolutely no habit of mistaking the plural for the singular, why do scholars doggedly insist that Matthew 28:1 is an idiomatic plural? But once I started pulling on that thread, I was left completely speechless, because I discovered that their only strong argument supporting the idiomatic plural is Matthew 28:1 itself. Their logic goes like this: because we have already decided that Christ only spent one Sabbath in the tomb, and it is written in the plural here, it must be an idiomatic plural. Wow, isn't that a textbook example of circular reasoning, using the conclusion to prove the premise? Now that the shield of the idiomatic plural has failed, the claim of only one Sabbath maintained by the Friday crucifixion theory is exposed as a massive flaw. In contrast, the Thursday crucifixion theory exhibits a near-perfect fit, because between Christ's crucifixion and his resurrection, there were indeed 2 Sabbaths sandwiched together. In addition to Saturday being the fixed weekly Sabbath, Friday was also a Sabbath. This is because that day was Nisan 15 on the Jewish calendar, a festival Sabbath. Let's pause for a quick bit of trivia. According to Old Testament law, Jewish Sabbaths are actually divided into 2 major categories. The first category is the weekly Sabbath, based on a 7-day cycle, repeating indefinitely. In AD 321, it officially aligned with Saturday on the Gregorian calendar and has continued to this day. The second category is the festival Sabbath, or Holy Convocation Sabbath. There are 7 such special festival days throughout the year, distributed among Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. The day of the week they fall on is not fixed. It is determined entirely by moon phases and the calendar. When these 2 types of Sabbaths occur together, it occasionally creates the rare phenomenon of back-to-back Sabbath days. And the week of the Christ's crucifixion happened to hit just such a consecutive 2 Sabbaths. Hearing this, you might immediately object. Wait a minute, the The Bible clearly states in multiple passages that the day Jesus was crucified was the preparation day. Isn't preparation day always Friday? Yes, that day was indeed a preparation day, but that by no means implies it was Friday. Because the day before a festival Sabbath is also called a preparation day. In fact, John 19:31 specifically identifies the following Sabbath as a high day, a special festival Sabbath rather than an ordinary weekly Sabbath. High, in Greek, is megas, meaning great, grand, or supreme. Some explain that a high day means the festival Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath coincided on the exact same day. But that is not how the Bible defines it. We can look to John 7:37 for a cross-reference, where the exact same Greek root for high is used. On the last day, the megas day of the feast. This clearly indicates that a high day refers solely to the festival Sabbath itself. The final day of the Feast of Tabernacles is precisely one of the 7 festival Sabbaths mandated by the law in Leviticus 23. Once we clarify that high day means festival Sabbath, all the clues instantly connect into a single line. If Christ was crucified on Thursday, Nisan 14, the day the Passover lambs were slaughtered, then the next day, Friday, Nisan 15, would be the exact first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the high day Sabbath that John spoke of. This introduces an implied detail. Since a day in the Jewish calendar begins at twilight, to ensure they did not violate the law during 2 consecutive days of Sabbath rest, the Jews had to have all food, labor, and chores for the next 2 full days completely ready before sunset on Thursday. Not only that, but they also had to prepare the Passover meal for that evening. This perfectly explains why the Jews were so anxious to break the legs of the crucified men and hurry to take the bodies down before sunset. They were facing an incredibly tough, super preparation day. Some might still question, even though Matthew uses the plural, Mark 16:1 uses the singular. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and other women bought spices so that they might come and anoint him. Isn't this a contradiction? It is not a contradiction at all. Rather, they complement each other. Mark is speaking from the perspective of after the specific weekly Saturday Sabbath was over. The women went to buy spices. The use of the singular form even implies that the women were highly likely catching the night market that began on Saturday evening, as a new day commenced at twilight, while Matthew emphasizes on the entire timeline, stating that after these 2 back-to-back Sabbaths had concluded, they arrived at the tomb. The 2 passages, side by side, connected by the Thursday crucifixion theory with 2 Sabbaths, something the traditional Friday crucifixion theory absolutely cannot explain. In the next episode, we will pivot to a third, entirely different perspective to continue verifying the hidden, ironclad evidence behind the Thursday crucifixion theory. See you next time.